Thank you very much for the introduction. So the start point of our paper this afternoon is the observation that there are various lexical items that actually correspond to the English even in analytic languages like Vietnamese and also Mandarin Chinese. We, however, contend that these different events are not perfect synonyms, and they do not enter into any sort of agreement. And consequently, despite the fact that these elements share a common scalar meaning, we argue that they are distinguishable through the scales and also the alternatives that are involved. And finally, and then so both the traditional likelihood-based account and the reverse gradability-based account that will be discussed later will hold for different events for Vietnamese and also for Mandarin Chinese. Then finally, we suggest that these pragmatic differences between different events can actually be predicted by the syntax of these different recitations of events. So let's just familiarize ourselves with the landscape of the different events in Vietnamese and also Mandarin Chinese. So Vietnamese and Mandarin Chinese have several different elements that correspond to the English focus sensitive element even, and often discussed in the literature so far are the Vietnamese thậm chí and cả cùng, as can be seen in in 1A. So we have tí, thậm chí, cả, sổ riêng, cũng ăn. And we also have the Mandarin correspondent in 1B, so we can have a sentence like 张三生吃连榴莲都吃，或是连榴莲也吃。So we categorize these different markers into two groups with respect to how the two components of the event's non-truth conditional meaning are represented. Specifically, we suggest that the Vietnamese thậm chí and the Mandarin Chinese 甚至 invoke a strong scalar presupposition, while their additive inference can be suppressed. And while the reverse is true for the case of Vietnamese cả cùng and Mandarin Chinese lian dou, meaning that these elements have a strong additive inference but suppressible scalar inference. So if you look at example number 2, you see that exclusive context actually disallow additive even cả cùng Vietnamese and lian dou in Mandarin. So we have a context here. Although people thought Thi would not perform well in the game, he actually won a medal. So we in Vietnamese, if you want to say, well, what's more, Thi even got the gold medal. You cannot use the construction, the cả cùng construction, right? But what has been left unscrutinized so far is the fact that Vietnamese thậm chí and also the Mandarin Chinese 甚至 are not the only scalar events in these two languages. Specifically, we suggest that that in Vietnamese, also in Mandarin Chinese, we have elements like den or gone, and also hai or gun. And these elements are actually also scalar or instantiations of scalar events. So we have an example in 3 and to demonstrate this point. So in Vietnamese, we can say something like đi, then, so read, con ăn, right? With the same or the singular even interpretation. And then what's more interesting is that all of these different events can actually co-occur. We have the example for A for Vietnamese and for B for Mandarin, right? So there are two questions to be addressed here. First one is like, how are these different scalar events distinguished in these two different languages? And second, are these elements synonyms to each other, or do they agree? Do they agree with each other? So Our position is that they do not agree with each other, or they are not synonymous to each other. As we show in the following sections, our position is that different events would be associated with different scales. Right? So let's move on to the next section. So we observe that not all scalar events are felicitous in a context as in 5. So in 5 we have this: a princess just gave birth to the first child. So if we wish to say something like, well, the princess even gave birth to a boy, then you can use thậm chí as in 5a, công chúa thậm chí sinh con trai. So it's okay. You can use còn, công chúa còn sinh con trai. That's also okay. But interestingly, you cannot use then, right, as in 5c, công chúa đến con trai còn sinh. That sounds weird here. The use of then is infelicitous here because it would suggest that giving birth to a boy is more likely than giving birth to a girl, which is bizarre, right? So now the additive event cả, cũng, and the Mandarin equivalent lian dou, as you can see in 5D, are actually naturally disallowed from this exclusive context because they they must carry an additive meaning. So if we have a sentence like công chúa cả con trai cùng sinh, it's okay, but in this case it's not, because it would suggest that the princess gave birth to more than one child. But the context says that she gave birth to the first child. Right? Okay, so such an explanation that is applied for a case of additive events does not really work for the Vietnamese then, which does not necessarily carry an additive meaning. So we have 2 pieces of evidence for this. The first one is that then, as you can see in 6, then can co-occur with the exclusive moi. And so we have a sentence like then, tí đến mỗi nước có uống. This sentence is totally perfect. And the second, then is also felicitous with other exclusive contexts, such as the gold medal context, as in 7. Right, so it's the same context as before. Right, although people thought that T would not perform well in a game, we actually won a medal. So you can say something like, "Well, hơn thế, đi đến huy chương vàng còn giành được." Okay, so with all of these data in mind, and we contend that then God behaves differently from thậm chí with respect to the exclusive context. As in example number 5 and 7, because then God and thậm chí involve 2 different types of scales, right? So let's move on to to section number 3, when we discuss the variety of scales that are involved here. Right. So the nature of scale that is involved in the scalar meaning of even has been subject to debate. And it has been argued that the scale is uniformly based on either logical entailment and likelihood, improbability, informativity, noteworthiness, or unexpectedness. So as in the standard theory, then the basic meaning of the scalar even is stated as follows: the proposition that is modified by even or the adjacent P is stronger than all of its alternatives Q, so that for all Q, P entails Q, P is more likely than Q, or P is more informative to Q, so on and so forth. But still, we have some questions to be answered. The first one is like, how is the scale in this case is determined? And the second one is that, is there a unified notion of scale for even cross-linguistically? Now, Greenberg 2016-2018 challenges the likelihood-based semantics for even and favoring the agreeability-based semantic of even. And it is proposed in her work that the scale of even can be uniformly captured through a contextually supplied gradable property that is associated with the non-focused part of the sentence. So we have to illustrate reverse analysis. Then we have an example from her work. As in 10, so we have this context here. Any princess who gives birth can stay in the palace. If she gives birth to a boy, she becomes a queen, with the result that on average 50% of those who gave birth to who have given birth become queens. So we can have this statement here. Princess Jane just gave birth. She even gave birth to a boy. So if we have a boy that is stressed, then the sentence is totally normal. But if we replace a boy by a girl, then the sentence becomes weird. So giving birth to a boy or giving birth to a girl has the same likelihood probability, all else being equal. But in 10, it is saying when a boy but not a girl is in focus. So our position is that what is being compared here in 10 is not the likelihood or probability among all of the alternatives, but specifically Jane's degree of happiness or her status in the royal house. In worlds where Jane gave birth to a boy, which is mapped to D1 in 11, and Jane did not give birth to a boy, which is mapped to D2, right? And Jane's happiness or her status in the royal house is a conceptually supplied gradable property G that is associated with the non-focused part of 10, right? So let's further compare the Vietnamese thập G and then in terms of scale. From what we learned in section number 3, then we would argue that then is sensitive solely to the likelihood or probability scale, while thập G concerns with the scale that is based on Greenberg's contextually supplied gradable probability G. So the disparity between thập G and then is illustrated with the poker game as in 12. So in 12 here, we have a context D and they are playing poker. Now the likelihood or the probability of getting every card is the same, right? But their face values are different, right? Anybody that ever played poker would know this. Now their face values form a horn scale, meaning that when you have an ace, and ace has a greater value compared to a king, and a king has a greater value compared to a queen, so on and so forth. Since no unlikelihood scale is available in this context, we correctly predict that then cannot be used as illustrated in 12a. Conversely, when we replace it with thập G or even with which we will return to in section 6, then that sentence becomes felicitous, as can be seen in 12b. Right. Another point to be mentioned here is that there's actually a symmetry between subjectivity and objectivity that is involved here. So recall that thập G and then are both scalar. But they differ in whether the scale involves a likelihood or the speaker's own evaluation of the alternatives. Now, in 13, you will see that thập G is incompatible with the speaker's oriented adverb quả nhìn. So you cannot have something like the quả nhìn thập G and bánh mì quá hạt. Now, this incompatibility is straightforward if we are on the right track. That thập G conveys a speaker's sense of an expectation or surprise, and you see that there will be a logical conflict if we have the evaluation of a proposition as both expected represented by Huaimin, and remarkable or noteworthy represented by Tangji. Right? That's why the sentence is bad. Now we analyze Tangji as a speaker-oriented particle representing the speaker's propositional attitude that the projection is most noteworthy with respect to some contextually supplied property G. The attitude, so we see that, so we take Tangji as an attitude predicate, and attitude predicates are generally considered to be universal word quantifiers. So our analysis explains why Tangji can quantify over word alternatives, as in reverse analysis. On the other hand, then only triggers a scalar inference that is based on likelihood or probability and is not speaker-oriented in essence. And because of that, it allows, because of that, this nature allows then to concur with adverbs like Huaimin. So we have an example as in 14 to illustrate this point. Now, the third scalar even that we have in this presentation is gone, and we suggest that gone is a generalized scalar even. So we have, as you can see in example 15, and gone actually survive the previous poker context, right? Then it's not good, Tangji is okay, and gone is also okay. And then we also have something similar to that for Mandarin Chinese. So instead of, so the equivalent to Vietnamese gone would be the Mandarin Chinese hai or ken, right? So we suggest that the bare gone serves to mark its focus elements as the strongest alternative in terms of informativity. And so it can be the most likely, the most significant, or the highest ranked entity in the certain dimension. And so without then gone simply involves an informativity scale in a very general sense, and with the addition of then the scalar inference specifically targets an likelihood or probability scale.
So to summarize what we have seen so far, so there are at least two types of even in Vietnamese and Mandarin Chinese. The first type is the 政治 type, G type. That's akin to speaker-oriented adverbs, and they invoke a scale, subjective scales. That is contextual. They trigger contextually relevant property in the sense of grammar. On the other hand, there was this stand, gone, or high type, right? They invoke more objective form scale based on the ranking of informativity among the alternatives, and we stand this particular even in Vietnamese. A subtype of this scale is activated solely based on unlikelihood or improbability among alternatives. The further question we can ask is why? Okay, why do these different events trigger different kind of scales? And we think that their scope property or their syntactic property might offer a clue for their distinction. Okay, so our sense, probably have no time to go through all this, but our basic idea is like this. Okay. So there is a Tangji or 甚至 type, and Tangji or 甚至 type, they are causal operator. So they trigger. So the contextual alternative they trigger are different a set of alternative propositions. Okay, so for example, in 17, if you have Mary gave birth to a boy and you use this 甚至 or Tangji as the even, then this 甚至 and Tangji, they are causal operator, very focused operator, and then they trigger they trigger the contextual alternative, this squiggle C. It's like this, okay? The set is a set of proposition, like Mary gave birth to a boy in W, or Mary gave birth to a girl. So you're comparing actually is the different propositions, okay? And that proposition is the input to the Greenberg style scale On the other hand, if you have a con or high type of even, they are not causal operator. They are only VP level operator. So the contextual alternative they trigger are a set of properties. And since they are properties, so they cannot be the correct input to the Greenberg style scale. Okay, they can only form a more generalized Horn scale based on the ordering of the properties. So for example, if you have things like 张三还吃了5碗饭 or something like that, you use high or con. And the contextual alternative you trigger is actually lambda x and x85 both right, and alternative will be 84, 83 both the right, etc. Okay, so you're actually comparing the scale according to the ordering, the natural ordering of the property, 18.5, 18.4, 18.3. Now, this correctly predicts the contrast between a subjective and objective scale. So con and high must respect to the objective numeric scale of the focus part, and can I introduce a subjective Greenberg style scale. Okay, so for example, if you look at 19 and 20, 19 is the Vietnamese example, 20 is the Mandarin example. So I'm going to only say the 20 example 20. 你是吃了5个水饺 ate 5 dumplings. If you use high, you can say 张三还吃了10个，张三 even ate 10. With respect to the ordering of 5 and 10, right? Numeric ordering. But if you cannot do the reverse with high, you cannot say 张三吃了10个水饺，你是还吃了5个。It's kind of odd. Okay, now, so that concludes our talk, actually.